Thank you. No, it's not you, Martha. Thank you. Welcome to the policy session for the Board of County Commissioners on August 10, 2022. I will now call to order. Gary Schmidt, County Administrator.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So all commissioners are present. Commissioner Schrader is on Zoom. Are you there, Commissioner Schrader?
Yes, I am.
Very good, thank you. This is an elections update with Clackamas County Clerk Sherry Hall, and she's brought with her today Becky Dahl, who's the elections manager, and Bill Cloran, who's an elections counsel to the clerk. So Sherry, welcome, and go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay.
Welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Sherry Hall, the Clackamas County Clerk, and good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioner Fisher, Schall, and Commissioner Savas, and Gary Schmidt.
Commissioner Schrader's online.
And good morning, Commissioner Schrader. Is it morning where you are?
I'm not. I'm still in Oregon. I have a plane to catch in about 2 hours.
Okay, well, nice to hear you.
Okay.
And you introduced the others. That's good enough?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to just, basically, you're going to get the diary of the election, starting from the first and going till the end. And I know that you're probably going to have thoughts. If anybody wants to stop me wherever I am and ask something, you can do that.
Just go ahead and just stay with your chain of thought. Commissioners may want to ask questions or not, but, you know, it's just, you're up. Just go for it.
Okay, so you all know that on May 3rd, the barcode reading problem was discovered in our office. And so we put some thoughts together what to do about that. And first of all, I notified Gary Schmidt, notified council, Hart Election Systems, and the contract printer. We discussed the methodology of how to take care of this problem. We considered printing and mailing new ballots. That was rejected because there would be potential voter confusion. We considered adjustments to the scanners, and the Hart company rejected that because it would have required the system to be recertified. It is certified to the specifications we have, and if we change it, it has to be recertified. We considered duplicating ballots with darker and clearer settings, which means we ran the ballots through the copy machine at a darker setting. But the preliminary test showed that that didn't do anything. So we couldn't use that. That was because of the noise in the barcodes with the white lines going across. They also appeared in the darker settings. And then we proposed scaling up the ballot duplication process used for the damaged ballots or otherwise machine unreadable ballots. And that process was proposed to be adopted, and that was the one we used. On May 4th of 2022, we informed the Secretary of State of the problem and the problem solution and determined that 50 to 60% of the ballots were not reading. The SOS directed us to update our elections security plan before proceeding because of the magnitude of the duplication required. Approval of the update required before proceeding and duplicate ballots to the printed in-house. Wait, let me do that again. Approval.
Hey, Sherry, I'm going to just ask, could you just slow down a little bit? I'm just trying to capture it all.
Trying to make notes.
Well, I'm not, I'm just trying to track it, and I'm missing some key pieces, so I don't know if you can just talk to us or just slow down just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time here capturing it all.
I will try to do that, thank you. And I also don't want to say the wrong thing, so I am kind of
Yes.
reading it. Okay, the SOS directed us to update the election security plan before proceeding with duplication because of the magnitude of ballots that needed to be duplicated. It's basically already in our process, but this was not regular. It was way out of line. Approval of the update was required before proceeding, and the duplicate ballots were to be printed in-house. Okay, on May 4th, the next day, the paper supply to use for the duplicate ballots were given to us by the contractor. They gave us 150 sheets of the paper to be used. And this was a significant step because that specification of paper was generally not available due to the COVID supply chain issues. Machines to print duplicate ballots and toner supplies were secured from Canon. And on that day, our return of ballots was 4.18%. That was small.
That was what? 4.18%, that was what?
That was the return of ballots that we had. We track returns daily so that we
Right,
know how many
okay,
we're
I
getting
see.
back.
I
And
just
we only
didn't- I
had
just
4.
didn't hear the last word.
Okay.
Point of clarification.
Am I talking into this okay?
Yeah.
Okay. On May 5th, the security plan update transmitted to the SOS was approved. The duplication started that day. And on that day, our return percent was 5.25. On May 6th, we had 8 teams processing ballots, and the returns that day was at 6.48%. So they were coming in slow. On May 9th, the offer of staffing assistance from SOS, Marion County, Washington County, and Clackamas County staff was offered. Supervision and training, as well as space requirements and security, was considered. Clackamas County staff was considered the best option for us because they were already working here. Others were likely to be under stress as those county ballots were coming in. The returns that day was 9.90%. On May 12th, there was attempt to staff for the weekend. We wanted to work through the weekend. And we asked all of the staff that was working that day. We didn't get very many volunteers. We didn't even have enough to make up a half crew. And the returns that day were at 13.80%. That was the Thursday before Election Day. On May 13th, new crews were added. Training had to be taken care of with everyone that hadn't ever worked elections, and that kind of slows our process. And returns that day were up to 15.90%.
Sherry, thank you so far. Just want to just ask, when was the first day or first days in which the damaged ballots were being duplicated by hand, approximately?
It was after the security plan was approved, which I just said.
May 5th?
It was after the 5th of May.
After the 5th of May, and the May 5th was a Thursday, so, and, you know, I think there was a camera shot that showed Mr. Madcore. I think you even participated as one of the volunteers. Is that correct? Right around that
It
weekend?
was one of the first.
Yeah, one of the first. Okay, so about not May 5th, May 6th? Okay. All right, thank you. Go ahead, Sherry. Sorry for interrupting. I just want to get that
That's okay.
clarification so we keep everything chronologically organized here.
Okay, on May 13th, which is the Friday before Election Day, there were new crews added. That was when we were at 15.90%. That was the Friday before Election Week. On May 16th, the volume of returns increased a lot, and it went from 15.90% to 21.40%. On May 17th, which is Election Day, the Secretary of State and her staff came to see the process in person, and she offered staff to assist. Returns increased that day from 21.40% to 34.20%, roughly 50% above the predicted total for the election. Because with the slow returns for the whole time before Election Day, we did not think we were going to have high returns for that election. And additional staffing we knew would need to be put in place. On May 18th, the EOC, or I think it's now called Disaster Management, right? Yeah. Took over as far as coordinating all of the many county employees that came to work elections. And they had checklists, so one of their staff came down with the checklist and checked off each name as they came into work. And they took care of scheduling all of the county personnel. And on election day, our return was up to 37.10%. And that was when we realized we really needed to staff up with the 600 and some, or however many we could have. We really didn't have the space or the need to do that before that day, or before Monday, actually. On May 18th, EOC again schedules, they did all the scheduling and checking of all the county staff. And that was on May 18th. On May 21st through 22nd, additional staff from Washington County, Marion County, and Secretary of State arrived to work with us. 2 shifts started working. There were limitations due to the space and the supervision. And we also needed to get all the supplies to, equip the rest or the other group of people, because we did open a second ballot processing room. On May 23rd, county reconfigured the lunchroom in our building where they put in security and cameras, and the observer area was set up even though they had to be outside. And that was when we could start having additional staff. I have now June 13th, we certified the results to the SOS, and the final amendment to the election security plan was approved, and that was because of the kitchen space. It's extra space that needed to be in our plan. And we couldn't have done any of that without the help of all the people, Gary Schmidt especially. I don't know how many emails you put out for staff to volunteer. Daniel Niebauer, in charge of disaster management, was the one that took over all the scheduling and checking in. We did not have enough staff ourselves to do that. And I just really want to thank the commissioners, all of you, and all of the county staff that came and worked, because we could never have gotten it done on time. This was the plan we adopted, and it worked because of creativity, resiliency, and determination, along with the core election team with their experience and determination. And we were determined to get this done on time. I think Gary predicted a date that it would be done, and he was right. But truly, it could never have been done without all of the extra county people. And we did work 3 weeks straight with shifts from 7 a.m. to noon and 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. And we did it through the weekends, including basically 2 holiday weekends. We did it with Memorial Day weekend with all the county staff. And because we got additional directives from the Secretary of State for hand counting, we had some that worked the Juneteenth weekend also. The immediate problem was one of quality control and the contract printer. All ballots that we printed in-house for the dedication worked well and were read by the equipment correctly. It was a printing problem. The method of handling the problem and securing the supplies to deal with the issue was decided upon within 48 hours and did not change. Scaling up was needed because the actual voter turnout exceeded the predicted turnout by almost 100%. And the unpredicted bump came on election day and on the days on either side, because now that we accept postmark, we also received almost 9,000 ballots the next day at the post office. And it was just few the days after that. This timeline shows problems were identified promptly, solutions were developed promptly, and immediately applied. A different printer, that's what we're doing now, but let me just say one more thing. With all of the things required for this election, the election was certified on time on June 13th. The SOS directive that we received on June 8th told us to hand count 69 batches of ballots on 2 races. That was completed on deadline June 21. And the directive that we received on June 10th for an administrative recount of 6 contests, 225 batches of regular ballots, and 20 batches of PCP ballots was completed on deadline, which was June 23rd. We were told that we could have extra time if we couldn't finish on time, but we didn't have to ask for that. And I have not heard anyone talking about an article that was in the Pamplin paper that talks about what we did, and I have a couple copies if anybody wants it. But the headline was, "The SOS directed this as an audit of the duplication process," the second directive. "This state-ordered audit has concluded that Clackamas County's tally of results from the May 17th primary election was accurate, despite faulty printed barcodes that required hand duplication of thousands of ballots." And this is a quote from that article. So the Secretary of State approved, and everything was done exactly as it should be. And I think it's really a compliment also to all of the county staff that had never done this before, that they did it right and very quickly.
Okay. Sherry, I have a question. I know the Secretary of State's office had staff in the ballot counting room for several days. When would they start attending at a consistent everyday basis?
I don't know if we track that.
Yeah.
I can send you an email and tell you, because I have the one from the office telling us what day they were going to start coming in.
And for those who are, either going to listen to this today or listening to it in the future, I just want to so you say SOS, you mean Secretary of State?
Yes,
Right.
Secretary of State.
And you report to the Secretary of State in a subordinate fashion, so to speak. They're
Well-
really your go-to person that can authorize changes, or in these circumstances, that's your authority to go to, correct?
Right, and the thing I've heard said at that office is that they have broad rulemaking authority, and that's what their directive is. When we get a directive from the Secretary of State, it's law for us. And there was, when you were talking, there was one more thing I was thinking of.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention while you're, and that is that, I believe it was the Monday or the Tuesday following the 5th or 6th, when I had a conversation, and I asked Mr. Madcore, again, I'm on the ballot, and so is my colleague, Commissioner Fisher, we're both on the ballot, so we were, I was trying to stay as far away from the building as possible, not to be.
You can come to the building, just not in the
Yeah,
process
I know,
room.
but I just thought it would be safer for me to just keep my distance. So
Right.
I asked Mr. Madcore, he happened to be in the room, and I think a couple of my commissioner colleagues were there in the room. Before our meeting started, we were just starting to walk into the room. I said, how'd that go? How'd that counting go? The damaged ballot procedure. I go, how many ballots do you think you were able to do per day? And I think Mr. Madcore's response was about 1,500 at that point in time, early on. I go, 1,500, I start doing math, not knowing what the voter turnout's going to be. I said, it's going to take forever unless we start really gearing up. And I think that, as you mentioned, there was a high voter turnout period, which is higher than you anticipated, plus the postmarked change of the law added more ballots than you anticipated. So I guess it's a good thing, just in summary, that as we really learn, as we're in this learning curve, yourself, the Secretary of State, our staff, I think we were kind of realizing that the workload to transfer those ballots and how many ballots there were was greater and greater as the days went on.
Right. We have looked at previous total turnout of 5 primary and presidential governor elections. And we look at how it's coming, at the beginning, but it just, really exploded at the end. And there's a lot of sensitivity to election integrity right now. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I'm hearing that voters are being told to wait till Election Day to vote. And that's why that turnout came so high. But we can probably plan for that in November also, and hopefully the ballots will just be opened and prepared and run through tally with no problems. But we usually can keep up with the election, with the ballots. We usually keep up and have everything that's received by Monday before Election Day already in the, through tally, and then the first results on election night are up through Monday usually. This was unpredictable, so.
Yeah. So in those.
And there was large numbers of governor candidates.
Yeah. In those days that were leading up to the election date itself, May 18th, those days leading up to it, as you were all gearing up, can you explain to us the process? If you have a volunteer that says, I want to help, from that point, you identify that person, whether it's a staff here at Clackamas County, whoever that may be. What do they need to go through as far as training and time before they can actually be in the room to duplicate the ballots? How long does that take?
I'm going to let Becky talk to that because she has done the training.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. I'm Becky Sterndahl. I'm Elections Manager. The answer to your question is if it's somebody from outside off the street, they need to go through our process, which includes a background check, which takes approximately a week if we fast track it to get it back. So that does create some lag time in getting people in to help that just want to come in off the street and help. County staff coming over, it takes at least a shift for them to really start understanding. One of the unique things about elections is not everything that seems like it's a common sense solution or idea is legal. And so to just have people come in and do what they think is the plan is not something we can do. We have to supervise them very carefully and very closely to make sure that all the laws are followed and all the rules. Right. So it takes at least, at the tables, doing that duplication took at least a shift for them to really kind of grasp all the little nuances of it. And to have someone assist us with supervision, that was several days of.
And I don't know if this last question, Chair, and I think this will be my last question, but it's more directed towards either Gary or the
Paul,
clerk.
I appreciate that. What I would like to do is I'd like to Sherry to present her after-action report on what led up to this and what corrective action she's taking. And if you want to hold that particular question, or if you think it's relevant now.
I think it's relevant now because
All
I
right,
just
go
want
ahead.
it's just that block of time. I think it kind of helps continue and close out the frame. How long approximately did it take for our staff, maintenance staff, to facilitate the conversion of the lunchroom and all of that? How long did it take? I mean, I'm glad we did that. I mean, because we wouldn't be able to have a place for the people to work unless we had the place. So how long did that take?
I thought it was very quickly, like within 24
The
hours.
kitchen?
Yeah.
An hour to an hour and a half. It was just done. And with training staff, everybody, comes in and just sits at the tables like they're ready to work because that's where everything is that they can look at as they're being trained. But each table of workers, which is 3, one of them is like a team captain with the, more experience. So once everybody's trained and that person can answer questions to the new people. But it goes slower. And the best thing, we had many that worked many shifts, not just 1 or 2. And the more shifts, the quicker they are.
Thank you. I just want to give my gratitude and compliments to all the people that participated in volunteering their time and worked there, citizens, internal staff, everyone. Just wanted to say kudos. I know it was a very tough time and we were, under a lot of stress to get it done. So I just want to pass that on. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, so Sherry, I may have heard you wrong, so I'm just wanting to make sure I understand. I thought I heard you say that there was 100% increase in the ballots from previous elections?
No, from the Friday before.
Oh, from the Friday before.
Election Day.
Okay.
By Election Day, it had,
It
the
doubled.
returns increased 100%.
Okay, so that was my first point of clarification. And then I'm just looking, I feel like after this, I've become political scientist because I've been so interested in looking at the numbers and the percentages and how many votes. But I was just, while you were talking, looking back at some of the other May elections, and in the official results section that's at the top of the website, in May it was 37.77, of 2022, May of 2021, 27.94%, May of 2020, 46.79%, May of 2018, 28.76%. So it seems like this 2022 sort of falls somewhat in the middle of that sort of bracket, but doesn't seem like it's extraordinary of a great return, since in May of 2020, we almost had 47% of ballots returned.
The
So I'm just
30
trying to put this all into context. Oh, Becky's raising her hand.
Yes. I track this as we go, and we track by day. And in May of 2020, we received ballots earlier, a greater return earlier in the process. Just on Election Day, for this May election, we received more ballots than we did on Election Day in the presidential general
in 2020.
in 2020.
But wouldn't that have been anticipated, since there was an additional week granted, so people could really wait until Election Day to vote? So didn't we
Well-
put that into our thinking? I mean, I know
Week for
that
the
I
bar-
did in my
For the
thinking.
mail postmark? Are
What
you
was
talking
that?
about the postmark
Yeah.
week? Yeah, because, well, the ballot either has to be in or postmarked by Election Day.
Mm-hmm.
We can just receive them longer because of the mail and the time it takes. But that's not really, I think, a difference with the voter.
Okay, so you didn't anticipate that ballots would be coming in later?
Well, we didn't know what to expect. This was the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, commissioners, and I see Commissioner Savas has his light on, and I want to thank, excuse me, my microphone wasn't on. I want to thank commissioners for using the lights, because it helps me keep track of who wants to talk. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, so the other thing that ought to be said to Commissioner Fisher's point is that the presidential election years usually have a higher turnout than the gubernatorial election years as well. So that's something
Always.
also to factor in there. So this is another anomaly, so to speak, that this was matching a presidential year, not a gubernatorial election year.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, and I mean, we're not supposed to talk politics, and I don't consider this to be, but we a lot of times see that the ballots voted by Democrats come in a lot earlier than Republican ballots. And Commissioner Fisher's race really changed from the first result to the end. And we had an election like that in 2020 with two commissioners, opponents, where one was like 10,000 votes ahead in the first returns, and by the end, the new person won. So you just can't predict how voters are going to vote, except that we do see that pattern most of the time is more Democrat ballots turned in early and more Republican ballots turned in toward the end.
So have you finished your timeline? Would you like to continue?
I have finished the timeline, but I just wanted to say one more thing to Commissioner Savas. With talking about the Secretary of State, she is the state election official. She's the one we go to for everything. She can tell us how to do things or, if we're doing them right. But the very last step that we do with the Secretary of State is prepare the Election Day cost report, which I sent to Mr. Madcore. I don't know if he shared it with everyone, but we also finished that on time. It has to be done by 45 days after, but this time it was a little bit later than that, and we did turn that in the day before deadline. So everything with this election was done correctly and on time.
So you're finished with your timeline. Mm-hmm. Okay, move forward to the November election.
Okay, well, first I want to talk about the August, because of course you know that we're not using the printer that we've used previously. And so I called Ryder Graphics or Ryder Election Services in Bend, and they printed our August ballots. We did a contract.
For the record, that is a new printer.
That is, well, it is a new printer, but they are the print company we used when we first got rid of CHAD ballots, punch card ballots, and went to our first optical scan system, which was
It's new.
ESNS.
I want to be very clear, Clerk Hall. That is a new printer from the May 17th election.
It is not, yes, it's different from the May 17th. Right, May 17th and previous was moonlight printing.
Thank you. So,
Okay,
and
but I
Ryder,
called
Ryder's on
Ryder,
board.
and they said they could do our August ballots, and I told them we want to see some ballots before they do the full run of the August election, which they did. They sent us a test deck that just were read perfectly. So then they printed our August ballots. And we are in the process of the RFP to find a new printer. But the timeline for the RFP doesn't allow us to do that yet. So we, again, are contracting with Ryder Election Services for the November ballot. And the RFP is in process, and we'll see who that presents to us.
Regarding the RFP,
Excuse me?
regarding the RFP, so you knew this was an issue after the May 17th election going into June, and you said the RFP process didn't allow for time.
It
But when
takes
did
3
you-
months.
But when did you decide to issue the RFP?
Well, it isn't issued yet. We're right, it's written.
Isn't that in itself, Clerk Hall, is an issue? Because we have contracting laws in government.
Right.
Correct. And as you know, you've been here a very long time, and I know you understand that. And so you say the RFP process didn't allow for a timeline. I believe it did allow for a line. Can you explain to me the difference? And maybe I'm not understanding.
It wasn't started immediately during the May election.
No, in June. Was it started in June?
And again, it wasn't until July, actually. And I don't have that time date with me. There's also some exceptions for elections which can be used because of the set-in-stone dates and timelines with election items. But the RFP will be done, maybe even before November, but the contract needs to be signed by September 1st for us to get everything in.
Good.
So you're right, it did not start until July.
Okay. We have two commissioners in the queue, Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, this question is for Gary, relevant to what we're talking about right now. The typical RFP process I've experienced, regardless what department it is or what ask it is, takes us some time. Could you just give us a thumbnail sketch of that time frame that a typical RFP process is?
The typical process is between 2 and 3 months from the beginning of the request for the RFP through our procurement staff and finance to putting it on the street, to giving 2 to 3 weeks for vendors to apply, for a review panel. All of that, the entire process is a 2 to 3 month process from start to finish.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of confused as to if we know that the printer wasn't working and we knew we needed a new printer, why wasn't there direction given to begin a new procurement process? I mean, like in May 5th, when this became an issue.
It could not have been done May 5th.
No,
It
but
could
I
have been
mean,
done
as soon as
after.
it was done, when we knew there was a problem with the printer, why wouldn't we have started? Or even May, June, it doesn't get started until July? This is really confusing to me.
We finished everything with that May election. What was the secretary at the billing date? Let me just find something. Okay, on July 14th, I signed the cost report for the Secretary of State. And truly, we were doing a lot of things with that election. Michael, my assistant, is the one who does the RFP, and I can't tell you the date that he started it with procurement. I can email that to you if you would like. And again, we probably should have started earlier, but it didn't start earlier. And we still have a printer. Ryder will be doing it for November. And another interesting thing Ryder told me, because many clerks and others in clerks' offices called me to do with our May election, many said this could have happened to any of us. And with talking to Ryder about quality control and getting ballots before they do the actual full run of ballots for the election, how is that going to affect the timeline? And he said that they're working on that because they have had many other counties ask for the same thing, where they haven't asked for that before. But because of this happening here, It truly could have happened to any county, because I know, Chair Smith, you asked me to check with Washington and Multnomah and how they do it, and they do not proof ballots either ahead of time.
Well,
So-
actually, I would believe, they do run test ballots in Multnomah County.
They get the test deck from the printer.
And they run huge, copious amounts of test ballots in, I believe, Multnomah County to the tune of almost 25,000 before each election.
That isn't what the director told me, and I
was
sent that
reported- That was
information.
reported in the news. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think test ballots were run. I will agree with you, Sherry Hall, that this could have happened to anybody in Oregon. I don't disagree at all with that. And it's amazing that it hasn't happened before, especially, you're using barcodes to be scanned for security purposes. I appreciate that. I understand, am I correct that you have 3 sets of barcodes per ballot?
Yes, and one is the security of the.
The security of the ballot, I appreciate that very much. I appreciate Clackamas County is doing that, although only 3 counties in Oregon are doing that. Is that correct?
3 counties use HART, that's correct.
Okay, and yes, it could have happened to anybody before, but the problem is it happened to us. And so we're the ones who are under the microscope. We're in the bubble, and everybody's looking at us, and you are doing wonderful in explaining everything here today. And I just keep,
I would like to explain one more thing.
yes.
I did listen to your meeting yesterday, and I noticed that you were talking about the vote by mail manual and the process for duplicating ballots. And I just want you to know that the 2020 version of the vote by mail manual and the 2022 version have the exact same direction. There is nothing changed. So the direction for duplication in 2020 and 2022 is identical. There are 2 options of duplicating, and a representative from the Secretary of State's office is the one who said that we weren't doing it correctly. But again, as I just explained with direction in the manual, we were doing the second option, which that person had not looked at. And once that was determined that it was correct, there was no discussion after, and we continued on with that.
I had discussions with the Secretary of State's office, too, on that, and this is the first time that I've heard that from you, and the Secretary of State said there was a difference in the 2 manuals. I'm glad to hear that.
I have the
also
pages
know-
if
please
you'd
let me
like them.
finish my statement.
Okay.
I also know that the Secretary of State approved what you did. I thought it was based on the 2020 manual, and they went ahead and approved it. I did not know the difference until today that you're sharing that with us, because the Secretary of State's elections person told Gary and I the same information, and that's a good point of clarification. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, this whole season of May 17th election just brought in all kinds of things. And there was also a couple of clerks who came up while we were working. One of them actually even worked a shift, I think, didn't Bill?
You work 2 shifts.
Yeah, on Saturday, the Marion County clerk. But with all that's going on, I'm sure the Secretary of State group learned a lot, because they're fairly new to this process. And they really wanted to do their part, and they were here. And the discussion of this duplication process also took place between another clerk and the person from Secretary of State's office. So there's just, information everywhere. Some people think they're right with things, some aren't. But, through all the discussion, this all worked out well, and we definitely consider this election to be a success. It was nothing but a success with all of the issues we had to deal with.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and address the August election? I believe you started talking about that.
Chair, can we ask just one question on topic?
Yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Yeah, and so.
Excuse me, Commissioner.
Yep, thank you. So one thing I thought was interesting, and I dug into this, and I know, Sherry, you were really busy, but I did some research, because I know your office had to be focused on getting the election done on time, so I didn't bother you with some of my curiosity, but I did look into this a little bit deeper, too. And what I discovered that the testing And just, I'd like to know your insights as well, because I never did ask you this question. My understanding that the purpose of the testing of the ballots is the primary intention is to test the voter selection aspect,
It's-
not really the barcode per se, and making sure that everything registers correctly.
Okay, the test is called a logic and accuracy test, and it's really a machine test to know that the machine is reading what is on the ballot correctly so that it
The
can.
ballot selection, or the selection of the vote.
Right, the
voter.
voter's selection of the boxes marked. And that's exactly what that test is for. We just did the one for August on Tuesday. We know the outcome of what the results should be, and the ballots are fed through the scanners, and then they're put into count, and it comes out correctly every time. We also do that test at the end of the election on certification day to make sure that it's still working correctly and nothing went wrong in between.
Yep. And thank you for that. And last thing, too, I didn't know that you looked into that as well, but after I heard the discussion yesterday, I did look at the manual, and I have a copy of the pages, and that section for ballot duplication is indeed identical.
In the
Word by
2020
word.
version, it was on page 41. In the 2022 version, it was on page 38.
Got
Well,
it.
hindsight's always 20/20. Hindsight's always perfect in this case.
So we
but-
should go by the 2020 manual, right, Chair Smith?
Well, absolutely, and I will say this, a lot of stuff has come out. We do the best we can in the moment in time, and we're under the pressure to do that. You say a logic and accuracy test was done. Was that done with ballots printed from Ryder?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Talking about tight timelines too, we're, of course, planning for the November election. And we just learned, we have Signature Graphics who prints the voters' pamphlets. And they print for many, plus they print the state pamphlet. Because, for general and primary elections, the state has a voters' pamphlet, and our county pamphlet is inserted in the middle of that, as long as we are within the page count. If ours is too big or theirs is too big, because it's only allowed so many pages, then you would get two voters' pamphlets, one from the county, one from the state. And there's even been two state ones because of all the candidates sometimes, or measures. And so we have 1 week between filing deadline and when our voters pamphlet has to be two Signature Graphics for printing. That's not very long. That is a lot of proofreading. We bring a lot of temps in to do it, but that's kind of a deadline already that could be bringing some pressure. You've all put voters pamphlet statements in, so you know how we proof and read and make sure that we print it the way you wrote it. Not grammatically or spelling correct necessarily, but as you submitted it.
So this brings up another question. You say you have temps come in, and I assume it's kind of hard to gear up, once every 2 years for an election to have people come work.
Well, they come, we have 4 elections per year.
Okay, so, whatever. So, other counties, they rely on temporary workers as well.
Of course, yes. And that has been a problem. And even with the people out there that are wanting us to get rid of machines and going back to the polling places, just think about, how would we staff them? Because you have to have a shift that works from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on election day. There's a lot of things that are difficult to do because we rely on people to be there to help us. And our temps, we have some many that are over 70 or 75.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, the other thing I've realized, and I've heard this from other counties as well, it was very hard to recruit volunteers this year because people still have the fear of COVID and didn't want to be in a room. Some were okay with it, some have not, and they've stepped back. So I just wanted
And
to
that's
just-
true, because COVID, something could flare up again, and there would be people who says, I'm not coming to work.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
But anyway, that was the August election. Do you want to know any more about that?
It's up to you whether you want to talk about the
I
August
just wanted to
election.
talk about the print situation.
Go ahead.
And I did, really. With our ballots, Ryder provided test ballots. The other thing, too, they were first going to just grab some ballots out of their ballots that they printed and just run those through. But our ballots have unique identifying barcode numbers on them, so you can't run those ballots twice.
Right.
They have to print a separate test deck.
Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, thank you. So I don't think you talked about the issue with the voter pamphlet statement and what happened. There was some news media about it. I got a call from the mayor from
From Denise.
Oregon City. What happened and why?
Okay, and I sent all of you the email to do with that. I sent it to all commissioners, Mr. Madcore and Gary Schmidt. And it just said precinct 600 is the McLaughlin neighborhood and Park Place. All of them got the correct ballot, but the wrong voter's pamphlet, because the voter's pamphlet for Oak Lodge was 8.5 by 14 folded, and the one for Oregon City was just a third of a page because only one of the mayor candidates put a statement in. And so those were mixed. And what the ballots were mailed on Wednesday should have arrived in post office boxes on Thursday. We learned of the problem on Thursday, printed a letter stating this is the voter's pamphlet, they should have gotten it. And those were mailed to 3,800 households rather than individual voters. And they were mailed on Friday and got to the mailbox on Saturday, I heard from certain people. And we actually get calls for voters pamphlet with every election because maybe the postman didn't deliver theirs.
So, just curiosity, in a general election, how many different voters' pamphlets would be mailed out in Clackamas County? Just one?
Well, I explained how the voters pamphlet works. For the November general, is that what you're talking about? Because that's
Yes.
a book.
Right, there's a book, okay.
And so the state voters pamphlet is printed, and when not all counties do voters pamphlets, but for those that do, they're inserted into the middle of the state voters pamphlet. And, the state voters pamphlet has candidates divided by party, so maybe all the representative Republican candidates and then all the representative Democrat candidates. And there was one year when our voters pamphlet was inserted in the middle, one page short of the end of the representatives that were one party. And I remember getting calls saying, why don't I have them in my voters pamphlet? And so what the state did that year, because they are in charge of it, did a single sheet flyer for all of the voters in that district. So corrections are made.
So that
at
was a
different
state
times.
issue on that particular, yeah. Okay, good. I have two commissioners in the queue.
Commissioner Smith, Chair Smith, can I just follow up on my last question? So I'm not sure why there was the mix-up with those ballots. I understand it was one precinct, it was 3,800 households. What was the problem? Why did that happen?
They were not in the right place at the mail house to be inserted in the envelope. What the mail house does is they inkjet the envelopes. They go down an assembly line, they inkjet the address on the envelope, and then there's insertions, the ballot, the return envelope, and in this case, a voter's pamphlet. And that stack did not get into the right precinct.
Okay, do we know why?
No. But when we mailed out the replacement, we mail at the pre-sort rate, so it's 10 to 12 cents per envelope. It's not a 55-cent stamp.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my overarching concern, which I would really like an answer to, is what is the quality assurance for not just the ballots, but also for voter pamphlet statements? We know that one was missing from the voter pamphlet statement for a candidate. I mean, what is the process to make sure that all the steps are followed? And if they aren't followed, then where's the accountability if we're working with a contractor or if it's a mail house or whatever it is? Because with the heightened sense of trust in election integrity, these kinds of mistakes are just not acceptable to the public.
There are
And
so
nor
many
should they
moving
be.
parts with elections. When you think of all of the partners we have with that, I mean, we partner with the post office to deliver ballots on time. We partner with printers who print our ballots or our voters pamphlets. There's just a lot of moving parts. And We do have staff at the mail house when our ballots are being inserted. We don't have anyone at the print shop to watch the ballots being printed. I know that there's some that have that. It's humans. Things happen, and we correct it if it's something that is our correction. But there are lots of moving parts with elections.
Yeah, well, I'm curious about the quality assurance process, would really like an answer to that. I mean, it's something
Quality assurance for,
to make sure that things are done correctly. I see that as lacking in, I'm not hearing what it is.
Commissioner Fisher, it is something that staff works on every election. How can we improve? What can we do better? And it is something we're looking at, is what we can do to ensure and make it easier to ensure that things are inserted correctly. So it is something we are working on.
Okay, doesn't really answer my question. There's a quality assurance plan, quality assurance process, making sure things are done correctly. It's part of a business enterprise. I don't know what's happening in the clerk's office, but, and I know you're
and these things don't
independently.
happen in my office.
You're an independently elected official, and I get that, but, and I'm sure you get plenty of calls, but we get those calls too. And we have no ability to insert ourselves to make sure there's a quality assurance process, to make sure that voter pamphlet statements are done correctly, to make sure that any of those pieces. So I'm interested in knowing what
don't-
the quality assurance process
We
is.
do not purposely want anything to go wrong, but many times it's out of our control. I think as far as, you guys are the commissioners, so everything probably comes to you. There's things that come to other offices too. It's just the nature of what everything is. I'm totally willing anytime to talk to anyone who has a complaint, and I've done that many times. Quality control is extremely important, but we are not the ones at the mail house. We're not the ones at the print shop. We're not the ones delivering the mail. I remember an election where some postal person decided he just didn't want to deliver the voters' pamphlets. So we got a call from a neighborhood association that 700 or more didn't get a voters' pamphlet. And we don't have them reprinted, but if you have a P.O. box, like I do, I get a voter's pamphlet in that box, plus I get one at my house. So at the post office, I just throw it on the counter, which is what many people do. They don't want to take it home. So with that election where the postman decided to do that, we gathered as many as we could from the post offices to put them back on that route. But, you know, things happen. We try to correct it, but we don't control everybody's work ethic or the way they do their job.
Well, it's usually not the people, but the process whenever there's a glitch or a challenge. And so looking at something systematically with an eye of what is the process, where did it break down, who's responsible, how do we correct it? Sitting here, I have no idea if we, as the clerk's office, how that happened that a candidate was left out of a voter pamphlet statement. I don't know how that happened.
Leave someone out. What, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, all I know is I got a call from a mayor who said that her statement was not included in the voter pamphlet.
That is the precinct 600 where they were missing from all of those mailings.
Yeah.
And an interesting piece with that, yesterday I got a letter from a voter, including that voter's pamphlet, saying that she got her ballot the day before, and then the next day she got her envelope that had the voter's pamphlet in it. And there's 4 candidates for Oregon City Mayor, but the only bio was the one you're speaking of. And it looks like Clackamas County is running a very biased election. She didn't read at the bottom of the voter's pamphlet that person has to pay for the statement to be in there. And if they don't pay to put it in there, it's not there. So there's a lot of things that are just really not known, and we can explain. But voters' pamphlets aren't bios, number one. I guess they could be called that, but Out of 4 candidates, only one chose to put something in the voters pamphlet.
You can come back, Commissioner Fisher. I have 2 other commissioners in the queue, Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, when we just were talking about this yesterday, I did pose a question about, if it is indeed an emergency, which I think Mr. Madcor's response yesterday would that, at least the May 18th or 17th or May election was not an emergency. But if the authority granted by the suggested changes that we're going to be discussing tomorrow were such that we would have or not have the power to intervene in a private sector business like a printing house or a mail house, to assure, or I don't know exactly what, but I would like to know, Commissioner Fisher, what if there is a human error made in the mail house, private sector that we contract with, and they make an error, and let's just take this case in itself as an example. What would you suggest that we do? I mean, I don't know if we should, publicize and get the name of the person who made the human error. I hate to do that because human error is human error. None of us are perfect. But I'm just wondering what your suggestion is, Commissioner Fisher, for a human error made at a private sector business we contract with.
I mean, with any human error, it's usually not the person but the process. So what is it about the process that broke down? Was it our instructions to the mail house? Was it that there wasn't proper supervision? Is our contract adequate? And when we're dealing with these things, I don't know. I'm not responsible for sending the voters pamphlet statement to the mail house, but breaking down each and every step when there is a problem to look at it is really important because the people in our community expect that our elections have integrity and that these kinds of mistakes don't happen.
And you're completely correct. The voters deserve to trust every piece of the election process. This piece with the voters pamphlet was corrected within 2 days. It was actually done the same day that the ballots were received. That's how we found out about it. And we will definitely, this mail house was in place when I became clerk, which was 20 years ago, and they had been in place a lot longer than that. We used to be their only election, but now they have many, many elections that they do. Because businesses close down and you have to find a new, contractor to do your work. And you're correct, the communication has to be exactly correct. And I actually went to the mail house the day that we reprinted. We took the envelopes to the post office, and they're kind of close to each other. And we did talk about it, and direct instruction is the most key piece. So, but this happened with this election, and it shouldn't happen again. But also to say that it won't ever happen again is kind of a hard thing to say, because we're always working with humans in the businesses that we contract with.
Chair, if I
Yeah,
just...
I know. I
wanted
was
to
waiting.
follow,
I
yeah.
know you do.
I wanted to
didn't know.
follow. Yeah, I wanted to follow on that. I just wanted to ask. I just want to build on my original reason I put my light on, but I just wanted to get the question to Commissioner Fisher. But on this note, I just want to say again, overall, I mean, it's important for me to say this right now, I think, and that is that no one's happy about either the May or this one here, the August Oregon City election. So it's not. I'm not happy. It's created a lot of grief for my campaign and my campaign going forward. I'm sure Commissioner Fisher has similar thoughts as well, and others that were on the ballot during this May thing. So, it is frustrating. However, I think it's also fair to make sure that if we are going to make improvements so these things don't happen again, we need to make sure that we actually are analyzing it and identifying where the error actually is to better ourselves, not to either blur it or to confuse it or whatnot. So I just want to just say that, during this election, not unlike any election, people call me and says, Paul, or Commissioner, I didn't get my voter's pamphlet guide, the voter's guide, in the May election. and whether it was a neighbor or was someone a block over. But do I trust that the mail house got them and they were supposed to deliver to all households? Of course. But I can't, I'm not gonna blame the post office, but really, whether it's human error or it's slip, who knows why it didn't enter that particular mailbox. Same goes for whether it's in my election, when I've had to put out a mailing, sometimes they get lost and they don't arrive. I know the machine printed them all out correctly, but they didn't get to their destination. I don't blame it's human error. I never have taken the mail house to task or a printer to task for that. And in my private business, the same thing. When I did mailings for my private business, there are things, the ball got dropped. In my business, we made errors in my business because I employ people. People are human. We all make mistakes. So, again, I'm not defending any which way, but I think we have to factor in after action and how we improve ourselves, that we're never going to get anything we do, elections, any department, road department, anything. We're not going to do everything perfect. There's going to be errors.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I'm going to caution that we keep our opinions, as opinions, and we're right. This is your time to explain the election processes and going forward. Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, good morning, Sherry. Good morning,
Good morning.
Becky. Every human endeavor is subject to problems. And the difference between good management and bad management is, one, quick response to solving the problem, and two, looking at what happened to determine what needs to be fixed so that the problem doesn't happen again. Now, you, the clerk's office, you certified the election on 13 June on time. You had the help from the county, which was a responsible action from the county to assist give you the manpower you needed to make it happen. But in all this discussion this morning, there's two things I see important this morning. One, the glitch that happened at the printer's office before the primary, what happened, and what is the corrective action to make sure it doesn't happen again. And two, prior to the special election for the mayor of Oregon City, what specifically happened on the mail out, and two, what actions are going to be taken to make sure it doesn't happen again. This is what's critical. Now, I was hoping this morning we'd hear exactly what those corrective actions were going to be to make sure these things don't happen again. But I heard, Becky said you're looking at it. Sherry, I heard you say some of these things are out of our control and they shouldn't happen again. But the bottom line is that even when the clerk's office employs outside agencies like the print shop, the mail house, you cannot delegate your responsibility. You cannot give that responsibility to somebody else, and so that means that your job becomes even more difficult when dealing with these outside agencies, and how you are going to ensure administrative oversight to ensure that they are operating in such a way that you don't end up with a problem like you did for the primary and this last one last week with the special election. Because the bottom line is that anything happens and anything fails to happen is the clerk's responsibility.
That's correct.
Okay, so I, as a commissioner, I have a responsibility to answer questions to constituents who present their concerns to me. So, again, there's been a lot of talk this morning about the things that happened, but the real bottom line is, boiling this all down, the real bottom line is, what went wrong? What are you going to do to ensure that those things don't go wrong again. And I know it's difficult, but that's why you're the clerk. You know, you've got 20 years' experience and probably 80 elections under your belt. It's probably no one who has got more experience in problem solving when it comes to the elections office than you do. And I certainly wouldn't want your job. But again, this morning, when we walk out of here, what we need, I had hoped for was an assurance that those problems that cause these problems have been identified, and that corrective action has been planned so that it doesn't happen again. Because I don't really care a lot about some of the little details that folks have made a big stink over. You know, I care about, A, you certified the election, B, you identified the problems, and we're going to have some assurance that it doesn't happen again. Okay? So, in conclusion, Becky and Sherry, you know, I know this is a big problem. You're looking at solving problems. You've identified that some of the things are out of your control, but the bottom line is that everything's got to be
In our
under
control.
your administrative oversight, and that no one has, that you do not defer any responsibility to anyone. It's always going to be your responsibility.
Well, I already have it in my plans to be at the mail house each of the days in November, or for the November election. It will be in October. But I have been there before. It's been a while since I've watched the whole process, but I will be there in November, and that will probably be 5 days. Yeah, this August election was just part of a day because it's under 50,000 ballots, but in November it'll be a lot longer, and I will be there because that was my question too, was how things are checked at the mail house. The ballots all have precinct numbers on them. The inserts don't, like the voter's pamphlet, but we are going to be placing that on that type of a voter's pamphlet. If it's just a one page for a small election, we will be putting the precinct numbers on the pamphlets to match the ballots they go with. In a big election, we don't do that. But the voter's pamphlet in a big election is the big newsprint style book that is sent by the post office just to addresses. They don't have the voters' names on them. Where the voters' pamphlets for the August election went in the ballot with what we sent. So that's the difference.
You want to
Okay.
continue? I'm going to interject, Commissioner Scholl. I think your statements were right on. Do you want to continue talking about corrective actions for November or not?
Well, I will, but I know Attorney Bill Cloran has raised his hand. He'd like to make a comment if that's
Bill,
okay.
I didn't see you. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Is this on?
Yes, it is.
I'm Bill Cloran. I am special counsel to the county clerk. I thought that I might be able to help with some of Commissioner Fisher's concerns on quality control for the ballot printing and the procurement process. As a matter of fact, Mr. Madcore and I began consulting almost immediately about the problems with the print house and how some of those might be addressed. I'm not sure where the investigation is in terms of determining the exact problem that took place with this printer. But we did look at the contract instruments that were used in order to do the contract with the printer, and what was used was a purchase order contract. The state statutes for ballot specification only require that the ballot be printed on good quality paper with black ink. And the ink thing tells you about the age of the statute because virtually everything now is printed with toner and is printed in a digital fashion. In looking forward, I had discussed with the clerk and with other folks what the best method might be for going forward with procurement and looking in particular at the quality control issue. So during the period before the RFP process was put into place, we were looking at whether to use an RFP process, whether to use a basic ordering agreement, or whether to continue with the purchase order. Purchase order seemed undesirable. It also seemed more desirable from a quality control standpoint to have a long-term relationship with the printer, which the purchase order does not create. So we were looking at the basic ordering agreement and an RFP with a minimum of 2 years, which would be 8 elections that we would be looking at. I also went and did some research for the clerk on quality control methods, and the clerk's office also did some research with Hart on the quality control methods. I don't want to get too far into the weeds as far as the quality control was concerned, but specific individual quality control for each ballot is done by one printer, Hart Systems, which is terribly expensive. They quality control check each ballot before it goes out of the print shop. That didn't seem like something to recommend. We asked the procurement folks whether they had a quality control specification for printing, and nobody did. So what we were looking at was some statistical sampling models to get 100% accuracy. Those all predicted that you had to do what Hart was doing, which was a 100% quality control inspection at the printing plant. What we did do was to decide to try out private industry and to go forward in the quality control process by having the people as a part of the RFP propose a quality control process that would then be reviewed by our evaluation committee. As Gary pointed out, all of this takes some time, and so while we did change printers to go to an established printer for the August election, and because of the time crunch for the November election, looking forward, we'll be evaluating quality control processes that are proposed by the printers as a part of the RFP selection process, which will be based on quality and not price. So I hope that helps.
You satisfied? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cloran. Would you like to continue, Sherry?
Let's see. The election security plan is another thing that we now know has to be updated every time there's any change. Under previous administrations, that wasn't ever pushed like it has been this time. So that's something new for us. And I have the statement here that kind of talks about a few things, that's how we look at things, I guess. And I'll just say, it is banal to say that we have put things in place to be sure something like this never happens again. The key is being robust and resilient enough to deal with a situation when it happens. And we do feel like with the May election, we dealt with the situation when it happens instead of putting it off timeline, which has been talked about a lot. We didn't really know that we needed it until basically election week. Despite the Chicken Littles of the world, and with the help of county leadership and staff and the folks at the SOS, this unanticipated situation was successfully dealt with. And we learned a lot from it. I'm not sure that you need to even talk about that. I mean, I felt horrible that it happened because of the need to build trust in voters, because we all know for the last, since 2020, there's just been such distrust of every piece. And that shows a lot in our office and the other clerks in Oregon because of all the public records requests we get where they want to see things, and not all things are available to them. But with the printer, you heard Mr. Cloran say what we're doing as far as finding the quality control in a printer. Our staff at this time is, we open a half hour later than we get there in the morning. And so for that half hour, we are assigning staff to read the vote by mail manual because there's lots in it. And you just never know when something might pop up that's where you have to go and look. So with our reading and reviewing and discussion, we're going to get through that. We are fully staffed. We had one vacancy that we were able to fill with a very good quality person that we see so far. He was actually one who worked in our elections in May, loved it. He was an intern in the TS department, which ended at the end of June, and he said if there was ever an opening, he would want to work in elections. And it's not quite the FTE vacancy that we had, but his qualities really fit into what we need. And that's to do with reporting results on election night and any technology.
Just a point of clarification, TS means technology services.
Right.
And that is his skill level.
Yes. So I asked Gary if it would be possible to possibly hire him in that space, and he approved, and so it's done, and we are loving having such young energy. That's a very good worker. And on election night, too, I know Michael Newgard, my assistant, was not here during May, but he will be the one in charge of the reporting results, both to our website and the state website. And I just can't appreciate enough all of everything you guys have done, because it's because of you. I think it was a success in May.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other concluding remarks from anybody? Commissioners?
I'd like to say
Schultz,
something.
you're up.
Sherry Hall and Becky Sterndahl, Michael Newgard. This has been a difficult 4 months for you. And I'd like to thank you all at the clerk's office for enduring the challenge and for meeting your deadline on 13 June. And I'd like you to pass on to all the people that work for the clerk's office a heartfelt thank you for hanging in there and not caving into the pressure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And believe me, if you see something in the paper about our office that you question, please call me. I can tell you what happened or what's going on. Sometimes it isn't always in those articles.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, so I appreciate a lot of the detail that was provided. It would have been helpful if we could have followed along with a written report. I tried to capture, there's some pieces I wasn't able to get, but I would appreciate an after-action report in writing to look at it, because sitting here right now, I'm not clear on how we are remedying the issues that came up in moving to the future. And maybe if it's in a written form and we can look at it, that might be more effective. But I would really like to be able to answer the questions with something documented from the clerk's office as to how we are moving forward. And Clerk Hall, I hear you when you say that you didn't know it was a problem, that you addressed it in a timely way. But in my mind, and maybe I'm not remembering it correctly, but I recall when you came to us right away when this came before us, and Administrator Schmidt and this commission directed and said, whatever you need, what you need in regards to staffing, we are here. And that was, I think, May 5th. We could see, just as a matter of understanding that, wow, if even 50% of the ballots are defective, we have an issue and there's going to need to be more staffing. I'm very concerned that you are here today saying that you addressed it in a timely way and you are not aware of the problem until the day right around Election Day.
Smell?
We were looking at the turnout in the below 20% numbers up till the day before Election Day. We didn't have the space or really, we knew we could get it done by certification deadline, which is way later than what many people wanted. But we are given that time when things like this occur so that we have time to get through them. It is allowed by law.
Okay, and then my only other concern with that is even the elections are almost at 30%, 37%, almost 28%, 47%, 29%, 50%. I mean, going down each of the May primary elections, I don't understand how you could have thought you would have a turnout of 20% or less to calculate ballots to be duplicated.
Okay.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, yeah, I think we covered a lot of territory today. What I had mentioned a long time ago and yesterday, and I'll mention it today, 'cause I think today is probably the most appropriate time, is that I think it's a benefit for us to strongly move forward and quickly move forward with a after-action review or investigation by an outside agency, preferably outside the state, to look at it and really, as opposed to some of the misunderstandings or miscommunications, but actually look at the facts to determine exactly how to make the system better and refine it in a constructive way. And look at, I even heard that the Secretary of State's office might even want to update some of their policies and procedures to accommodate a situation like this if in the event it happens again at a scale this large. So I would really recommend that we do that. I believe that it would be smart for us to do that. I think it'd be irresponsible, frankly, to do nothing else but that. So that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Gary, what's your thoughts on that? Is it something that's just within the BCC's purview to investigate an independently elected official?
That's not the official, Chair, the process, not the official. And
But Paul, I would disagree in that she is an independently elected official in charge of that office. And I believe there could be an issue with that for the BCC just, we're going to investigate. It's one thing for have our internal auditor to perform audits throughout the county, which our auditor has on, and the auditor is targeted to specific things. But I think you're talking about, I don't know what you're talking about, a full investigation, but I want Gary to answer that. Or Stephen Madcore.
I'll start. Stephen, I need your help. Ideally, this would be a collaborative process where, Sherry, if you were willing to do this, that the county administration would work with you in hiring a contractor to do this work. Prior boards have done this before with the sheriff's office in particular. You've hired a contractor, sometimes without the sheriff's approval, to review the policies of an elected official's office. My opinion, that did not go well because the elected official was not always willing to cooperate in such a review, which is essential to do such a review. So it's really a collaborative process, I would say, if Sherry was interested or not in doing that.
Stephen Madcore, I'm going to have him comment first.
Yes, it depends upon the cooperation of the other elected official. It'd be similar to what the prior board did with the OIR report and the sheriff's office. They cooperated with it, but it would be collaborative. I think the central question is, what is it that we are evaluating or auditing? I mean, we're going to be in the midst of a litigation and or mediation with the printer, and we'll get to the bottom of that. How did this happen? But in terms of other issues or outcomes that the board would be looking for, you need to get clarity on that one as well to make sure that the scope of the evaluation is focused on a particular issue.
yeah, well,
And then Stephen, just a minute, Paul, and then Stephen, wouldn't the clerk's office have to agree to what the investigator wants to do so they could be provided the information?
Absolutely. Ideally, there'd be full cooperation and access by the clerk's office and the elections officials. Absolutely. Probably Secretary of State's office would be involved with, to some extent as well, most likely.
Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
yeah, so yeah, the whole idea is obviously this is one human error at a print house or whatever it may have been, or supply error, what chain error causes problem, but it's not. I think what we learned, and we need to capture this, we need to seize this opportunity to say, okay, after this happened, what process improvements in the event it happens again can be made? So I think it really, it's not about finding fault so much as it is about how we can improve upon all these processes and policies and so forth and procurements and all. We've heard a lot today. A lot of things have happened after the print error that I think we can improve upon. But it's not for us to say, and I think if it be done independently with someone with expertise in that field, would be a benefit, so we can, again, improve process throughout. I did share this idea with the clerk several weeks ago, and she was agreeable to it.
Okay. I did talk to the Secretary of State also, and I asked if they were going to write an after-action report regarding this election, and she said at that time, I think that was in June, that that's not something they normally do, and so therefore I understood the answer to be no on that. And since I haven't seen one, maybe she gave you one, did she?
No, but I actually did one a long time ago. I hadn't been in this position very long, and there was an election in Sandy, which included 3 annexations, and not everyone got the right ballot. And at that time, there was a recently retired clerk in Oregon who had opened a consultation business, and he came in and figured out what the problem was, which was that the printer packages up our ballots. You know, our ballots are folded, and so they're put in a box to go to the mail house, and then those ballots get inserted in the envelopes. Well, he put more than one precinct in one box, which only had a divider between the 2 rows of ballots. Some fell through. And ever since that time, they never did put more than one ballot style in a box, because now they shrink wrap them together if they're small, so they keep them separated. But that is what happened, which I contested that election, and we put those measures on the next election in November, and the voters were really happy that that's how it's done. But that was $10,000 at the time to have someone come in and figure it out. And I don't know what you would pay. Would that come out of my budget? I am totally willing to be cooperative, but we also are working towards November election, so timing is also an important factor to know about. How much time of our time are they going to need at this time?
I wouldn't necessarily suggest that it's, something that needs to be done before the election or anything like that. Obviously, looking at the other things we've done, like OIR with the sheriffs, that took quite a bit of time. So I would anticipate it wouldn't really be completed until early next year, I would assume, just from previous similar situations, so.
It's interesting conversation, and the scope of work, I would think, have to be defined on this. And, one commissioner said today, we are elected people as well as you. We're not experts in the area, but yet.
What kind of a source would you use for that? An auditor or something else?
I don't know. It wouldn't be me doing it. I would just assume that there's someone out there with the expertise in elections and machinery and equipment and processes that would be, could bring maybe an outside experience into this and walk us through it and clarify it, or again, identify areas for process improvement. I can see that there is opportunity for improvement, and if we do not, we're not doing our job as a government. I think it's important for us to improve the processes, especially, we need to learn as much as we can from this experience. And if we don't, again, I don't think it's responsible to pass up an opportunity like this.
There's another thought. This county used to have a print shop. I can't remember how long ago that was closed and outsourced. Everything we do with printing is outsourced. Would you ever consider opening a print shop where we could print our own ballots, our own envelopes? Every piece that we do is a lot of printing, and we have at least 3. We have the ballot printer, the inserts printer, GISI, and then the voters pamphlet printer. But would we ever consider that? Because
I don't think that we can answer that question. This is the first time that's ever come up, but I do think a third-party review is in order.
Right.
Would you be willing to cooperate?
Yes, I said I would.
On that, and help this board, or Stephen Magcor, or Gary Schmidt, in the selection process of an independent investigator, maybe investigator's too harsh of a word.
Assessment.
An independent analysis, let's put it that way. An
Yeah.
independent analysis of the elections processes. And I would also bring in the Secretary of State as well on this, because since they're monitoring elections, they've made certain observations, and they have talked to all the clerks across Oregon on procedures. I know that their office is fairly new, like you say, but I do think the SOS needs buy-in with this as well. I think that's very important. Commissioner Scholl?
The idea of an outside investigation, I think, would only be effective after we see an after-action report that lists the details of what went wrong, the details of each corrective action to make sure those details don't occur again, and then have that looked by the county auditor, and then we'll look at where we're at, and then decide if we need an outside investigation. But first things first. The first thing is the detailed report, after-action report, I think that we need to see.
From me.
That's what I recommend, because that report doesn't just help us see what went wrong and then assure us of your corrective action to make sure it doesn't happen again, but it's a tool for you, okay? It's also a clarification to the people of the county to reassure them that you have identified problems and identified solutions. So after action report, look-see by the county auditor, and then we can decide if Commissioner Savas's idea for outside investigation is warranted.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, Commissioner Scholl, I have come to deeply appreciate the methodology that you approach problems with. I find it refreshing and very effective in most situations. But today, we are here, and we spent an hour and a half expecting as a commission that we would have an after-action report, of which I do not believe has been produced in this verbal communication. I think the time is now to engage a consultant, and I believe that Stephen Madcore, Administrator Schmidt, with the support of the clerk's office and Bill Cloran, can strategize who should do that. And that independent investigation can help identify the things that Commissioner Scholl laid out, is that what are the issues, what is the corrective action, and to really identify what is needed moving forward, because we cannot delay this. The public expects to have election integrity, and as Commissioner Savas says, we need to do all that we can as a government to assure that.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I appreciate actually, and Chair Smith did say really cover what I was trying to convey, is that it's not really an investigation. That is kind of a harsh word. But my original words were either an after-action review or analysis of the problem. And I think that having it done by an outside agency to look in, outside looking in, not just at what we do at the elections office, but what we do on these outside agencies, as well as looking into the procedures and protocols spelled out in the elections manual supplied by the Secretary of State. I think there's a number of things, interactions there, and things that might be areas for improvement. So call it what you will, but I think that the level of detail we're looking for may come out of just this very work we're talking about. And also bring in some expertise and outside review that maybe the clerk herself couldn't offer because she's internal. She's close to this, and I think having that outside view would be good holistically into all of those entities, private sector, county here, the elections office, the Secretary of State's office, the manual itself.
Yeah, Sherry.
I think it should be someone who has knowledge of elections, because it's a very unique set of rules. I've been told by attorneys that law is an arbitrary set of rules, and so is elections. It's so only geared to elections. It's not like something you might do in purchasing or, in another area. Election laws are very unique.
Okay, so what I'm going to conclude this meeting today, and this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing consensus from the board, number one. They would like a written after-action report on your part.
Do you
So,
want the timeline I did?
Sherry?
I want some direction on what you want in that after-action report.
The after-action report not only includes the timelines, but your corrective action for the May 17th, and looking forward to the elections, what you hope to accomplish based on what you learned from the May 17th election for this August and the November election. Now, I don't believe that can be done in isolation. There's been many meetings between Stephen Madcore and Gary Schmidt and yourself. They also have a perception of actions that were taken or not taken. It's also going to require them and possibly myself to do the same, in that I had spoke to the Secretary of State, yourself, Gary, and Stephen throughout this. So you're not the only one that gets to produce some documentation on what was suggested that you do at a certain time that was suggested that you do it to avert the crisis. So you're going to have your report, and that's very, very important.
I'm going to have what?
You're going to have your report,
Okay.
but there's also going to be another report from my attorney and our county administrator, because there were suggestions made as early as May 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, clear up to Election Day, and that needs to be part of the record also. So it's just not you that get to do the report. You do it from your point of view. They will do it, and me possibly, from our point of view. Then I think the second piece, if it's okay with commissioners, we go forward with trying to establish an independent analysis of the May 17 election. Is that clear? And are there any questions?
Just to comment, Chair, thanks for the invitation. I just wonder if that's kind of duplicative of having this external do really the same. I mean, it might be a good idea actually to take all those, have everyone do that, compile their thoughts and review and have that ready for the outside piece. But I'm not sure that it ought to be a whole lot of, I'll say, time spent.
I'm going to disagree with that, Commissioner Savas, because by your own admission, because you were on the ballot, you were not involved. So I don't think one commissioner can make that determination. I'm going to go ahead as chair and make sure that happens, because I believe if we bring in somebody to do an independent analysis, they are going to ask for an interview with Stephen Madcore. They're going to ask for an interview with Gary Schmidt and myself and the Secretary of State. So it's going to have to happen anyway, so we're going to go ahead with that. I don't know who is in next. Will you, Commissioner Scholl?
Yes.
Okay.
In my opinion, it is very important that what we do here, your after-action report, and any corrective action that's taken by the county is positive. I don't want to see any negative undertones in this. We are one county. You are the clerk's office. You are a part of this county, a very important part of it. And so when we leave here today, Sherry, Becky, I want you to know that this is a positive process. The result will be positive for you, your department, the board, and for the entire county. I don't want this to be negative. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I think between Commissioner Savas and Chair Smith, I think it's all, there's an absolute point of consensus. It's very important, as I believe Chair Smith says, that the individuals who are involved definitely write up, while memory is fresh, what occurred, which will help inform an independent investigation. I don't see anything contrary in that at all, but that should be moved forward quickly, as Chair Smith says, but also at the same time look at an independent look at this, and then that evaluator will determine if they need more information or if they need more interview, but at least to start there in written form as to what people's recollections are as far as the timeline goes, and also what the issues are and what has been the corrective action.
Thank you, Commissioners. Seeing no further business before this meeting, we are adjourned.